In the recent event, Zwillingsstrom im Herbst, I was able to clear the boss stage ZT-10 with E0 Level 1 operators. And apparently ZT-10 is the most broken, unfair baloney in the game. I wasn't aware of this when I spent my 2+ days trying to clear the stage. So if ZT-10 is so bad, how was E0 Level 1 able to clear this baloney sandwich of a stage? So to start things off, I would like to thank Ruvia for the Chenalter support, as well as Kartel for helping me with ZT-9. So getting straight into the clear, Cantabile is perfect for the opening for charging the machine, as well as hitting the enemies right afterward, allow her to use the full duration of her skill to get the maximum DP. And then Elysium and NTR right afterward. And then after Elysium charges, get Chenalter down and Aya to charge her skill. And I decided to use spread shooters here. I did try to use Cold Shot and Melanite to have damage for the boss, but they didn't quite work out. So you see there that I changed it about a second later after the song started, and that is so that Cantabile can charge the machine again, as well as get DP from these guys right here. So getting Aosta down as soon as possible, and then Hoder to finish off the lineup. So I used the turrets to deal a bit of damage to the wind player. So for the turrets, the ball thing that you put down absorbs all the damage your operators do and converts it into physical damage over about a second or half a second of all of that combining, and then converting that into a physical damage shot. So I use Kafka to stall the wind player and tank the first hit, allowing Elysium to activate his skill, allowing him through, and Gravel down to bait the bind of the boss. And then, now that the turret thing has moved, I've been using this opportunity to deal with the cellos now. And then Texas Alter down for a little bit of damage to those cellos. I did delay Quirkus's skill to deal a bit more damage to the cellos, and then Enos to tank the boss. And then as soon as the turret moves again, I put down Kafka to time to tank the boss for Enos. So Hoder being the last one deployed is very important for the bind that the boss does, the mark, because the mark needs a certain amount of hits to be destroyed, and Hoder is going to be hit by multiple different operators to break that as soon as possible. So I retreat Elysium, he's done for now, and Enos, even with the mark, seems to be fine for right now, and then Osta can break that bind. So I'm going to pause it here to explain the boss. So what the boss can do is that with that mark, he marks 2 allied units in his attack range, and those marked units will be prioritized over other ones. And they take about 5 different hits to break, I think. And also, he does an AoE within his attack range, hitting all of your units within that attack range. And he does 750 arts damage, equal to his attack. And that is very important, and with mentioning using Melanite and Cold Shot earlier, Melanite didn't work because she only has 700 hit points, and that isn't quite enough to tank 1 hit from that big AoE from the boss. and that was causing me problems. So Chen Alter just seemed to work a lot better for that, and previously using Executor. And that also allows me to DPS the enemies as well as allowing the ball thing to absorb the damage for the turrets. So next, I put down Yato as soon as the boss attacks, so that I can focus on taking care of the rest of the cellos here. And then as soon as the cellos are done, I leave the ball there to charge both Chen Alter's skill as well as Hodair's skill a few hits. And that is very important for the DPS window of this boss. So for the turrets, as you can see, they have this orange bar that runs out. That is how much time the turrets will stay in those locations. And that is very important for timing everything. And Quirkus, with the previous attack speed buff of the devices that I used with the cellos, is able to keep Aosta alive. So here is the one and only DPS window that I have on this boss, because previously when the boss is in the way of the turrets, there's other enemies that will take the hits for him. And so we use the attack speed to get as much damage as possible, and then switch to the purple song because that seemed to be a lot more effective, especially with Yato Alter. And one thing that I forgot to mention is the boss's teleport mechanic. So he teleports the last two operators that you have deployed randomly around the map with random facing. And so if you use baits for those last two deployed, it is very easy to deal with that. And using Cantabile as well to deal a bit of damage to the ball, that actually allowed me to deal with this boss. And previously, in a few minutes prior, he actually took like 5% of his health, or a few thousand, earlier in the stage, and that unironically allowed me to get to his second phase. And then just retreating when he attacks, that is fine. And then we are down to the second phase. I quickly use Texas Alter to charge the device to allow my team to get the attack speed buff before the boss locks the devices. And that is very important too, because as soon as he goes into his camping spot, with the attack speed buff, I am able to do around 30 to 40% of his max HP, which will make things a lot easier later once we deal with all of the other enemies. And with that DPS window you saw there, that let me go back a bit. That the last hit that made the boss transition was the last hit from before the ball thing expired. And the problem with this boss that I had throughout my time doing the stage is that the boss doesn't really allow you to DPS him outside of that window if you are completely relying on the turrets like I was. So after this, since the ball thing expired, he now teleports right next to Quirkus and right next to Aosta, and he never lines up with the turrets again before the time limit expires. The boss has a 5-minute time limit at ×1 speed for the first and second phase. So that is why this stage in particular was so hard for me, was that DPS window was so tight as it was. So for the second phase, what is important to note is that the boss has halved his attack. And he does have increased defense, but that didn't really seem to make much of a difference. Especially with the Yellow Song having his defense, as far as I'm aware. So here we just try to get as much damage out as possible before the enemies come rolling in. And I actually put Enos, I should have put Enos one tile over to the right so that Yato wasn't getting hit, but didn't really make a huge amount of difference. And then Yato's about to get hit, so might as well retreat her there. So basically the most important part of this stage was just making sure to bait the attacks of the boss to be not near the front line there, and knowing when to try to DPS him. So once the boss gets to 50%, he does the teleport again, so that is also something to be really mindful of. And then I use the turrets to also do a bit of damage to the enemies coming in from the bottom, and is how I mostly deal with the Liar enemies and the Wind players that are coming in from the right later in this stage. So let's move ahead a little bit. So these guys here, I honestly thought was going to end the run. I thought they were going to be too hard for me as soon as they got in. But I was able to do quite a bit of damage to the first one there, especially with Yato doing a bit there. But they get buffed by the Yellow Song, so I tried my best to group them together and then put them to sleep with Kafka. And they honestly weren't really that bad. And also the boss does do the mark in the second phase, but honestly that really didn't do anything because it's only to one target now instead of two. So yeah, I grouped both of them together. Then as soon as the boss attacks Enos, they're both grouped up, ready for using Kafka to try to stall them until the purple song. I do the same thing with the Wind player, and honestly they weren't really too much of a big deal to deal with. And overall, the second phase was a lot easier than I was expecting. The reason why I was panicking in the second phase so much with slowing down and with hovering over my operators was because I was so nervous. I had spent probably 2/3 to 3/4 of my time on the stage was purely trying to get through that first phase because of how tight that DPS window was. And with the second phase, it honestly wasn't really that hard, but I had only gotten to the second phase in total around 10 times. And it felt like more like 5 times, if I'm being honest, but I'm going to be generous and say 10 times total. So right here, a lot of off-the-cuff type of thing, if I can say it, improvising what was done here. And I wasn't really even worried about the time limit, because as soon as all the enemies are dead, the boss just stands there and you can DPS him whenever the turret is there. And then here comes the second set of Liar players, so do the same thing, try to group them together with the fast redeploys and try to tank the boss. If the boss does hit the main group, it isn't really that big of a deal, because with Quirkus and Aya there, I have enough like AoE, good enough healing there to not be that big of a problem. So going ahead, I pretty much do the same thing, and then you have one last Wind player. Actually, wait, where do I bait the second last teleport? I was actually pretty proud of looking back of how I dealt with the second teleport, if I can find it. So I put Cantabile down to get a little bit of DP, and then I had Enos there just at a little bit of HP, and I was able to do enough damage with the turrets to trigger the last teleport without affecting my front line. So I really liked that moment in the clear. But moving to the end, when the turret is on the left side, we can get rid of the last win player pretty easily as well. And then it's just doing what I did before with charging my the Chenalter and Hodair skills to be ready for when the turret goes to the other side. And then it was just timing, putting down Yato, and then baiting the boss while he's tanking all the hits. And then GG. So overall, I think this was one of my best optimized clears that I have done, and that is primarily because of how tight the phases were. Well, that phase 1 specifically, I thought I did pretty well with the improvising on that second phase, but I was really worried that I was not able to do this stage because I had beaten this 4 hours before the event was done, and I was shaking because of how much pressure that was on that second phase. It's like, oh, if this might be my last chance to do this type of thing. And I do have some recordings that I'll show here of what I was trying to do before. I tried to use Benna instead of Enos to tank the boss because Benna being a doll keeper, I thought healing wasn't going to be as much of a problem. And using Telopsis, I thought that using an AoE medic, I needed to do that. And Telopsis kind of worked, but I was thinking that the DPS window was so tight on the first phase, and I cannot overstate that I needed to deactivate Quercus's skill in order to contribute to the damage of dealing with that first phase. And in that final recording, I actually ended up forgetting to deactivate Quercus's skill in that first phase burst window, and I just remembered to do it after starting the second phase. So that was really funny looking back at that. It was like I was struggling so hard on squeezing out as much DPS as I can, and then I forget to do that. And then there was quite a few retreats on that second phase that I did forget. But thankfully I did have enough DP that I was able to get through it. So definitely one for the books, I think. That beating ZT-10 with Elite 0 level 1 operators, skill level 1, no potentials. Definitely if I had my own shelter, so I didn't get the reduced attack, that would have definitely made it a lot easier, but I'm really happy with how this one turned out. And with this being my first stage analysis type thing, let me know what you think and what I could possibly improve on that, or if I missed out anything you think of. And hopefully someday I'll do that 4-9 analysis. But hopefully this was a start on that. So, hope you enjoyed.